But the principles that Spirit taught me was that sometimes when you lose something that's very dear to you, navigating that is the stages of mourning. And Spirit taught me that there was another level. Thrive. I am not a survivor of what happened to me. I'm a thriver of the choices I make in my life.
Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, presented by Minky Couture, a weekly podcast where people share real-life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best lives. I'm Jennie Taylor.
And I'm Michelle Scharf. Minky Couture makes the best, most delicious, yummy, cozy, comfortable blankets in the world. I am a huge fan and have been for long before they ever became a sponsor of the show, long before I ever had a show. And I think everybody deserves to have at least one, if not several, Minkies in their closet. Well, don't keep them in the closet. Put them on. They're
on the bed, on the couch, in the basket,
everywhere.
Next to the wherever. Mm-hmm.
And it's springtime, so it is getting a little bit warmer, but there's always cozy evenings in Utah and a lot of events coming up, baby showers, weddings, anniversaries, all kinds of reasons to give as gifts. So go to minkycouture.com, or if you're lucky enough to be in Utah, there are 6 locations across the Wasatch Front, and you can go to minkycouture.com to find those locations.
Okay, today we have a really exciting opportunity to talk with someone you've known for a very long time.
I have.
Tell us about our next guest and how you two know each other.
Our next guest is my good friend, Annette, and we've known each other through politics many moons ago, about 12 years ago now, working really hard to get some new Republican blood in our county party. And we were calling phone trees and all kinds of stuff. And Annette, a few years after that, had lost her husband. And then when my husband got sick, I reached out to Annette and said, "Hey, Annette, how do you do this? Give me a roadmap," right? I was looking for resources and support and help. And Annette, what did you tell me?
I shut you down.
You did.
I shut you down really hard, and I said, I am not a resource. My situation is nothing like yours. You have a loving husband who you have time to be with, to say goodbye to. And mine was not that story.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even offer you anything.
Nothing. I just went nothing.
No.
Yeah. You just told me absolutely no. And I hung up that phone call and I was so shaken by it for a couple reasons. One, I was like, I had no idea that maybe you didn't have a loving husband. And I couldn't really comprehend, I think, what you had just told me. I was so shocked by hearing a no from a widow. I'm like, aren't you supposed to help another widow? Like, how do we get through this without somebody who's been there before? So that was really shocking. But through time and events and life, we reconnected, and you're part of my monthly book club, and I see you every month. And
I'd like to say I'm part of your inner circle. Well, your trusted inner circle.
That is the...
So we did come around.
Yes, we did.
Just took us time.
That is the truth.
Navigating the journey of life till we could reconnect.
That's true. You are a part of my inner circle, and I've really appreciated our friendship, and I love watching your growth process in the past 10 years. So, Annette, share with us your story.
Okay, we're going to make this really brief. Kind of condense it all down. I was born and raised locally, just north of here, with 2 parents to a family that had moved here from California only the year before. I was the 6th and youngest child. I wrapped up the family unit. I was sort of the bumper, the surprise child, with some time between me and the child before me. Our mother had mental issues. My father was a people pleaser. Together, they were in a codependent relationship that never changed. In my opinion, all 6 of us married into similar relationships because we were comfortable in the familiar of that environment. I have 2 brothers that used alcohol and various legal and illegal substances to numb and disappear into their disillusionment. Their lives ended prematurely at the age of 58 and 62.
Oh, my goodness.
I used exercise, reading, keeping busy, excelling, and withdrawal as my coping mechanisms. I was with my husband for 35 years before I desperately sought out a lifeline. That came in the form of divorce. I had no concept the consequences that were to come from that decision. But to this day, I am very grateful that I made that choice for me. But I will warn you, it cost me everything I held dear. Everything I thought was my identity. Everything. I have had to rebuild me and unravel all of the programming, all of the conditioning, all of the toxic behavior that was given to me from my childhood and my family home. And in doing so, I have recreated me. People see me who haven't seen me for a number of years, and they don't even recognize me. It used
You
to
look
be
younger now.
It used to be just the hair color,
Right.
but I really have
A light.
just a different Carrie, and people
have a
have a
light.
hard time. Thank you.
It's a bright light, and
Thank
you
you.
walk into a room and you feel it and you see it. And before, there was just this really distracted, purpose-driven. It's not that you didn't have purpose, but your purpose was to handle the things that you were going to handle, and nobody was going to get in your way. And there was no open door.
No. And the other thing I've noticed too is my closet has changed. My
for sure.
closet was very much the businesswoman, you know, the tan colors, I use them as camouflage. I wanted to blend in. I didn't want anyone to see me because if they saw me, they might see the broken bits. They might see the raw. And so to camouflage and just sit on the back row quietly and observe.
Yeah,
and not
I mean, my
stand
impression
out.
of you was that you were a very purpose-driven businesswoman who was successful. And all of those things were also true,
They were.
but not necessarily like an open door, not a warm embrace for a friendship.
They were my armor.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
my armor was still up when you
Which was-
contacted me.
Yeah.
So that's why I shut you down as the armor was still up.
Yeah.
I didn't have tools to be vulnerable. And I had to create those. That's what, you guys speak of resiliency. And resiliency is being strong enough and comfortable enough in yourself to be vulnerable and explore your inner.
Yeah. I love that.
And that took time,
Yeah.
years.
Well, I don't have to ask you the question because you just answered it for us.
Oh, I will again at the end with something maybe more. But
Okay.
I know you always ask that at the end.
Yeah. We actually
I've
been
listened.
asking it at the beginning now too.
Oh, okay.
So we've kind of changing things up, but regardless, you kind of gave us a primer. We'll let you answer that more later.
Okay.
So, do you have more to tell us about that story? Do you want to get into the journey?
Sure. Let's start
That
there.
was an amazing journey you went on.
Still am.
Yeah. Well, yes, and aren't we all, right?
Lifelong transformation.
Yeah. So I remember that being shocked. The first part was when you picked up and moved to Hawaii.
Yeah. So what happened was my husband's death was so public and so out there, and people perceived us as the perfect couple. Our ward, our neighborhood, my career people, we were the perfect couple. And with his death being so very public, and it ran through the close-knit neighborhood that we lived in, beyond the boundaries of what we call in Utah our ward. So it went beyond those boundaries, way beyond. And I was floored at how many people heard and how they heard and stuff. But when that kind of event happens, people's foundation, their ground that they stand on is shaken. They don't know how to describe it, how to put that square peg in the round hole. And people, that's comfortable for them to be able to do it. And so they wanted me to help them do that. And I couldn't. I didn't know how. It caught me by surprise, too. I wasn't able. I mean, I'd go to the grocery store and just try and greet people and just talk about, other things. And they would always come back to the event of his death. And it was raw. And they were confused. And I was confused. My children were struggling such. And so I knew I needed to find a neutral environment in which to start to put pieces back together for me, because I always describe it as I imploded. I didn't explode and scatter all over. I imploded. It all went just down inside this big black hole. And people wanted me to help them, and I couldn't. So I sought out a neutral environment. And spirit has always been, in the church, we refer to it as Holy Ghost, but outside of there, we refer to it as, creator, source, God, goddess, whatever your word is. Spirit had always been with me. And because of our relationship, I didn't rely on him or her, because there's no gender, as much as I should have. But she let me know I needed to go to St. George. And I was like,
oh, that's right. You went there first.
Why St. George?
Yes, that's right.
It's July. It's so hot down there.
Yeah.
July? St. George in July? Who goes to St. George in July? Anywhere. Why can't you take me to some place with a beach and a coast? Water is my element to heal. Why are you taking me to St. George? And he just was like, trust me. Okay, I'm going to St. George. And people would ask me, why St. George? I don't know, was my answer. I have no idea. I'm just supposed to go to St. George. I have no idea. I found a house. I rented it. I moved in. I had no family, no friends. And every single day was spent trying to get to know me. Now, here's an interesting thing. When you're in a relationship like I was, people-pleasing, you lose yourself. You don't know who you are. You are so used to making decisions with that other person involved. I didn't know what music I liked, what colors I liked, how to decorate my home, what furniture I wanted, what color hair I wanted, what length hair I wanted, how I wanted to dress. What did my morning routine look like? What did my afternoon, evening routine? Now, I was a businesswoman, very scheduled, and suddenly I didn't know me. And so being down there in that neutral environment, I got to find out what I liked. I bought a bike and went out bike riding. I looked like a monkey who was drunk because I had forgotten how to ride a bike. I bought a paddleboard and a kayak to go out on the water because water is my place to go. And I just started finding out who I was, what kind of morning I wanted to have, what were my favorite foods, things like that. There was so much going on. And then the opportunity came up. A lot of people have been impacted and part of this journey and have been incredibly influential. So their influence has to be noted. I began dating a year after. And one of the people I was dating asked me a very important question. There have been two people that have asked me some very pivotal questions. One of them was, he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. Hanging out, getting to know me, whatever. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I said, live in Maui. And I was a real estate broker, and be a broker in Maui is what I said. And he says, then why are you here? You need to get after that. It's not going to invite you over. So I went on Craigslist, and this is 2016. It was 2016. I went on Craigslist, found a job, flew over, got interviewed, got hired right then and there. I sold everything in my house in 11 days.
Yes,
Whoa.
I was going to say that happened really, really fast.
fast.
And that's why I can't believe I forgot that St. George was first, because I remember it because it seemed like you had just gotten down there. And
it was a year,
You were seeing some photos of you, and it seemed like you were happy, and you were doing some things, you were posting occasionally, and then all of a sudden you had all this stuff listed, and the next thing I see is you're in Maui.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa.
It happened really
happened
fast.
so fast.
It did. But there were things that led up to that, like Blake passed in December of 2014. My youngest son, came to me before spring break in 2015, and he said, I want to get away for spring break. I need to go somewhere. So we went online and we're looking at some things and stuff. And I ran across this condo that was available in Australia for a week for $199 for a week.
Wow.
Oh, my word.
And I went, okay, this is available. He said, it's 2 days to get there, Mom, and 2 days back. I'm not going to spend my spring break on the plane, And so I was like, okay, so we found him something else, something different. But Spirit again kept nagging at me saying, you're going to go. And I was like, I can't. Blake just died a few weeks ago. It's incredibly irresponsible for me to just where am I going to get the money for this? I'm busy dealing with the estate and unloading things and paying off debt. And that's the most irresponsible thing I can go. And he's like, you're going. And I was like, okay, fine. If it all works out, whatever, right? That afternoon, everything was done by 12:30. And I packed a backpack and went to the airport at 2. And the whole time I was having a conversation, negotiating with Spirit as I do. Not anymore, but that's how I was before. And I kept saying, it's okay if I just end up in LA for the weekend. That's fine. I don't really have to go all the way to Australia. And he's like, no, you're going. And I was like, yeah, we'll see. I may not even get on the plane because I fly non-rev. My husband was an employee of Delta. And so I got on the plane. I ended up in LA. There was a little bit of a delay. And let me give you a little background here, though. Not anymore. I'm an extreme planner. When we traveled, I had scenario A, scenario B. I had researched everything so that if things didn't come together, I had backup plans. So for me to pack up with 4 days notice to go to Australia with a backpack that I packed an hour and a half before was incredibly uncomfortable because I am completely reliant upon Spirit to take care of me because I hadn't done any research, nothing. I didn't even know, I had a condo arranged somewhere in Australia. I didn't even know where it was on the map. I mean, it was
You're just going to land and get a cab.
It was so spontaneous. Anyway, I'm on this Virgin Air flight, Valentine's Day, over the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and I'd never in my life had a panic attack, ever.
Oh, no.
And everyone's asleep because it's one of those midnight, red-eye flights. And I'm like doing lunges in the aisleway because I am so stressed, so uncomfortable. I'm over in the galleyway doing wall squats, just anything to take my mind off of what I have gotten myself into. What am I doing here? And I started to breathe really heavily. And I realized I was having a panic attack. And then I was like, no, I don't have panic attacks. This isn't like me. Spirit will take care of me. I'm good. And it went away. It was just a matter of moments, but it was real. And so I landed and went up to a desk and I said, I need to get to Coolangatta. How do I get there from here? And it was Sydney. She's like, well, best thing you can do is catch a plane, go to Brisbane, and then rent a car and drive there. It's only about 3 hours or something.
Oh, my goodness. So you're nowhere near where you're trying to get to.
No, because I did no research. So I went and bought a ticket and rented a car and got to Brisbane and walked over to my rental car and, of course, got in the wrong side of the car. And to tell you that for a planning person to be in a situation that was so uncomfortable. I mean, the seatbelt went the wrong way.
Yeah.
The shifter's the wrong way. The mirror's the wrong way. Everything's wrong. And so you have to just be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Which you're already uncomfortable with yourself.
Yes.
And this entire situation, you are
This was
you are in the
12
thick of
weeks
it.
after his death.
This is just an absolute mirror of what is going on in your actual life.
Yes. And so what I learned from all of that, there's a whole story. We're not going to go through there. But there's a whole story in that. The Spirit wanted me to know that I don't have to plan out everything, and it's okay to be spontaneous. And some of the best blessings and lessons come from being available to whatever Spirit wants to teach me when it wants to teach me.
Yeah.
And not to, a friend of mine used a phrase, I'm going to try and remember it correctly. Her name is Lindsay, and she said, everything I ever let go in my life is covered in claw marks. And that's where I was.
We can relate.
Little guilty laugh over here, like, oh, yeah, I'm writing that one down. I don't know that I'll put it on a T-shirt. But
But everything I ever let go in my life is covered in claw marks. It was so perfect, and I have gone back to that many times, going, am I hanging on to this? Do I need to let this go?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's covered in claw marks.
So that trip was 12 weeks in, but you spent a year in St. George 4 years later. You are deconstructing your life. You've had enough of people wanting you to deconstruct this loss of your life for them.
Yes.
So you go to St. George, you spend a year down there, and then you find yourself in
Maui.
11 days.
My dream.
In Maui, living your dream. What was that like?
Not everything I thought it was going to be.
In what ways?
I didn't ask enough questions going into the job. It wasn't everything he, the owner, had portrayed it was going to be. It was a shiz show. Absolutely a shiz show. It was so toxic. That brokerage was broken. Those people were not cohesive. It was a mess. And I stepped into the middle of it and was supposed to be the savior, and I didn't know how to unravel all of that. So I just did what I always did here with the brokerages that I worked with here locally. And some of it worked, and some of it didn't. Behavior is different in the islands. They're very in resort markets. People don't work the hours we work, like along the Wasatch Front, in a different environment. And it was hard to find a common ground because we needed to fix that. I mean, these people were used to working 3 hours a day, and that was it. And if they didn't show up, they didn't show up. Their word meant nothing about commitment and stuff. And they don't like being told, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. And it was hard to be a leader and a teacher and an instructor and be all those things and still maintain that culture and be respectful of it. We had committed to 3 years, he and I, the owner. And in 1 year, I met my goals. And so he sold the brokerage and I was out of a job and had no plan and nothing to go. So I came back to the Wasatch Front and started over again.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
But what was interesting about coming back is when I saw people at the post office or store stuff, they wanted to know about St. George and Maui because I'd been very public about it on social media.
Yeah.
They wanted to know about that. Nobody asked me about Blake. So the time was perfect for me to leave and they could heal. And I created a new narrative around me that didn't involve the event.
Right.
It wasn't, that event wasn't who I was. I let people know I'm more than what happened to me.
Right.
And our family. So,
yeah. So you've been through so much and you're still growing and on this beautiful healing journey. I get to sit with you at my book club every month, and I love your Facebook for people that may come across you. You do Lucille the librarian on Wednesdays.
Tuesdays, yeah.
Or Tuesdays, sorry.
Book review Tuesdays.
And just a book review, and it could be a bunch of random books, but a lot of them are ones that I tend to recommend to you.
Yes, they are. They absolutely are. Or
I
other
love
people.
hearing those. I'm like, oh, she's doing my book that I told her about.
When I moved back from Hawaii, I was at a yard sale of my sister's. That's where I was. I went with my friend Bridget in Santa Cruz, and we were at a farmer's market. So completely not my environment. And we were looking at, I don't know, asparagus. And the lady over around, you know how the booths are set up with corners and stuff, especially this one was quite large. So she was a good 15 feet from us. And I could tell she was staring at me, and I was really uncomfortable. Finally, I looked up and looked at her and I said, "Do I know you?" And she's like, "I know you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she goes, "I'm trying to place how I know you." And I was like, "Well, I'm a real estate broker from Utah, 30 some odd years. I worked in the LDS temple for a few years, you know. I just went on and on with things that I had that she might know me from, right?" Finally, she goes, "No, stop talking." And then she said, "Say something." And I said, "How are you today?" And she goes, "You're librarian Lucille."
Oh, my goodness.
And Bridget elbows me, and I go, "You listen to her?"
You weren't out in your crazy sunglasses. She always has a different pair of crazy glasses
I'm going to have to follow it.
They're tortoiseshell cat eye, great big, and they have green and white brooches on the outside. They are the most gaudy, ugly,
Where did you find them?
I ordered them as a gag gift for a friend,
perfect.
and when they arrived, I went, "Oh,
These are too good to
no,
give away."
this is the persona. This is going to be librarian Lucille. I'm going to do book reviews." So that's where she came from.
Yeah, I love them. I love your book
She goes,
reviews.
"My sisters, we all listen to you. We all think you're funny. And I love the books you talk about." So I was like, holy cow, someone actually listens to
Okay, we're going to have to tune in.
No, I love them. So it's just been so great to see you on this journey. You have, since the time of this incident and the loss of your husband, you are not the same Annette.
No, I'm not.
I don't even see that woman anymore. In fact, even just having to think back to who you were, you know, I have to think about that picture of you in our friend's house because it's so removed from who I have grown to love and embrace, you know. I will say I always saw it in you, which is why I reached out to you. And I always felt a connection with you. And I wanted to have a connection with you, but you were not receptive. But I never took that personal.
I'm so glad.
I just waited.
Thank you. Sometimes we do. We have to wait till the time is right for people to come into our lives.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the tools to help you. And I knew that. And so rather than continuing on in that role, who I'd been conditioned to be the people pleaser, I knew I didn't have the tools. So I just said, "No, I can't help you."
Yeah, I didn't even take it personal.
Glad.
I mean, I was sad because I was desperately seeking anyone that I could reach out to and just like, what am I going to expect when this actually happens? For me, it was all about this impending death, you know, at the time when I reached out to you. But it was really, I mean, I heard you. It was authentic, and I appreciated not being lied to. I appreciated you saying, "I can't help you. This is very different. Your situation is not mine." And I didn't really know your situation. I didn't know the hard details about it, which are really irrelevant. But what I needed to know is that it was different. You knew that I loved my husband. You knew that we had a family together, that we were very family oriented. You knew those things about me, and it was just very different than your experience of your relationship with your partner. So you're like, how can I tell you? And, you know, it wasn't until you started coming back into my life and you started coming to my book clubs and I started to really understand you really couldn't help me because I was asking, how can you survive this? And you were trying to survive a completely different set of circumstances that were so very different. And you're thinking, I don't know how to survive this. And I could see that and I could appreciate it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Like I was asking her, how do you get over losing the one person that you love with everything? And you were not recovering from that.
I'm going to detour for just a minute, use the word survivor. Maybe a year or two prior to Blake's death, Spirit, you know how those angel messages come to you 2:30 in the morning, and you're like, God, so much going on the next day. Just go away. Let me go to sleep, right? Woke me up and started relaying to me like a book. And I'd never written anything. I mean, I was a gospel doctor and teacher. I was a real estate broker and trainer. I did those things. I didn't write heartfelt stuff. It just wasn't in me, you know, because again, that's vulnerable and I wasn't ready for vulnerability. And woke me up and just started, and finally after, you know, laying there for 45 minutes going, just leave me alone. I was like, okay, fine, you win. Ran upstairs to my office, got my laptop out and just started typing. When it was all done and said, I went, wow. And it took about 5 hours. I just wrote a book. Huh.
Oh my word.
What am I supposed to do with that? And just put it away. But the principles that Spirit taught me in that book were my guide after this. And what it taught me was that sometimes when you lose something, you know, like a loss of a relationship or the death of a family member or loss of a job, you know, when you lose something that's very dear to you, navigating that is the stages of mourning. And everyone here can relate to that. You know the stages of mourning. You have the denial. You have the anger. You have the acceptance. And you have the moving on, the survivor, right? Spirit taught me that there was another level. Thrive. I am not a survivor of what happened to me. I'm a thriver of the choices I make in my life. And being a thriver was who I wanted to be. And I never identified as a survivor.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so I adopted that word. That's why when you asked me at the beginning, do I want to be known as Annette Thrive? I was like, no, because that's just a focus. When you're a survivor of something, you're identified as that. And that's not your whole story. That's a piece of who you are. It's like the margarine in the brownies. It's not the whole recipe. There's so much more to it.
Right. The concepts of the stages of grief, I'm not a big fan of. I kept waiting for anger and I kept waiting for denial, which never was a part of my story. I wasn't in denial. We were told from the beginning what was going to happen. We accepted it. I wasn't in denial after he died. He died in my bed. I called and had them come pick him up from the mortuary. He died lying next to me. Actually, I was outside, but when I came back in, you know, that's what it was. But I can't remember. I wanted to look it up really quick who came up with those, but it was some therapist that came up with those 5 stages of grief. The important thing is that whether you experience them all or not, these can be parts of grief. That is true. Like all of those stages can be parts of grief. But also, depending on your grief, it does become a part of who we are. Like I am not wearing my widowhood as a banner. I don't even like the title widow. Like I don't actually really identify with that. I'm still John's wife, but we're not in that relationship any longer. And he gave me the freedom to move on. So I'm not hanging on to being his wife. It's just that when he left, I was, and we didn't end that. So I will always be his wife. That doesn't mean I don't have room for someone else. I think where we get caught up, and sometimes people get hung up on grief or anger or whatever the issue that is holding you back in life, it's when we create identities to these emotions that we have or these words or titles that we use, right? And that's what you're saying. You're like, I don't want to be a survivor. I don't want to hang on to this idea that I survived this.
Right.
I didn't just survive this. I learned, I grew, I'm thriving.
So what helped me, I think, was I heard a story. Social media can be the encyclopedia of the current, right? And somehow I came across a story of a sister whose younger sister committed suicide, in her early years in college. And she didn't want anyone else to experience that. And so she took it upon herself to create this foundation. And she would go around to the local high schools and talk to the kids about how suicide impacts the extended family and friends, how it isn't just you ending the story. It doesn't end with you taking your life and everyone just moves on and they're happier because you're gone. Because that's the story you tell yourself. Everyone's going to be happier and better when I leave, right? And so she wanted to tell the other side of that. And after years, she became physically ill. She started having all kinds of internal issues, muscular issues, rashes, her hair was falling out, things like that. She, searching for answers took her a long time, but she finally ran across a study that she was reliving her sister's suicide every single day. So she was in fight and flight, that cortisol, the hormones that are released, and she was killing herself by reliving that. And so in my mind, I was like, I won't be that person.
Right.
I am not going to talk about this. This is not going to be my soapbox that I stand on.
Yeah.
I won't be reliving this.
Yeah. I've had that experience when I've been asked to go co-host on other people's podcasts and they want me to tell my story. And then I get all emotional. I'm like, wow, I thought I'm past all of this.
It's so toxic.
And then I go home and I'm like exhausted and I leave my room depending on, if I had to leave anywhere for it or not. But then I'll end up in bed and it's like, oh, that was a lot. And then I realized early on, I'm like, I don't want to stay in this story. Like, I'll repeat it a few times, but like, I don't need to relive it in every detail for everybody.
True.
The reality is my husband's dead and he died from cancer, and that's enough. Like, I don't really have to spew over every detail, because as you do that, you literally do start to relive it. And we're reintroducing another memory to our brain, because that's how our memories work.
Right.
The more we think about it, the more we tell ourselves about it, we are just rewriting that memory over and over and over.
Not just
again.
our brains, but our whole bodies. According to
absolutely.
What is her name? She wrote "The Body Keeps the Score."
Yeah, Louise L. Hay. Body Keeps the Score, I think, is somebody else.
Anyway,
yeah.
So that's the thing. It's in your tissues. It's in everything, So those traumas that nobody gets through life, this journey, without trauma. And trauma
it's Bessel van der Kolk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bessel.
Nobody gets through life without trauma. And I don't believe that we're taught in our youth how to process trauma. Mm-hmm. And trauma can be described as simply as anything that happens to us that's difficult or feels helpless, where you feel helpless. Something's happening to you that's adverse and you feel helpless. Yeah. So you think about that. You think about as an infant, you're crying and nobody comes and picks you up. Is that processed as a trauma? According to new research that they're doing, yes, it is. You have a near accident or something and something happens, or a family member gets very, very ill, or, things that are out of our control. So none of us get through it. But I don't think we're really taught the skills of how to process it.
I agree with that. And I also would say certain things are a traumatic event. For me, really, when I look back, I'm 5.5 years out now. When I look back at John's passing, it was traumatic at the time. Now it's just an event that occurred. It is natural. People die. We're all here. We're all on a death clock. Like, it's not really traumatizing that he actually died from cancer, because he's human and we live a mortal existence. But it took me a while to get there, right? There was a lot of healing I had to do in that journey because of the impact his loss had on me personally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, in relationship with my children. And those impacts are still happening today. But I can now accept that my husband's gone. Whereas when it first happened, it was more traumatizing, but I had some expectation that it was happening. I had a heads up, right? And so maybe it was a little less traumatic for me because I had some understanding that this was this in our cards. Jennie, I don't know how you feel, but I mean, Brent's death had to be absolutely traumatizing.
Oh, yeah. Totally traumatizing. Completely.
I mean, every military person goes with the understanding that they could not come back. But I've also heard every military person also tell me
it's going to happen to you.
They never think it's going to happen to them.
And you can't dwell on it, because what kind of life would you be living if you said, I'm going to go to work today and I might die? I'm going to send my husband to war today and he might die. That would have crippled me long before I was crippled momentarily or temporarily, whatever the word
There's
would
a
be.
built-in
Can you imagine, too, what that would have done to your children?
Oh,
your children were very young. For you to tell them, Dad may not come home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awful.
And I've seen that with people where the trauma is the trauma. And I think we can look at it one of two ways. You can either say, my worst case scenario has happened, in which case I'm afraid of everything, because we are living proof that awful things can happen. Yeah. And the people that say, oh, that would never happen, want to bet it's happened. Or we can say, my worst case scenario has happened and I'm still here.
Yeah.
And I believe the human being, the human species, is incredibly resilient when we let ourselves be, when we don't handicap ourselves with the thoughts in our mind. I mean, just look at the history of mankind. We keep getting back up again, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, losing Brent was absolutely shocking, traumatizing, out of the blue, completely rewrote my entire life, and became an incredibly fortifying turning point in my life. Because if we've survived that, I guess we'll survive whatever's next. Not that you wish for other things to be next, but we're not naive enough to think
also know
nothing else bad will ever happen.
Right. Like life. I had this one thing.
Yeah.
And so then I got mine.
I had a friend last night. He said,
and you know, Jennie, I actually used to have that thought. There is a family in my ward, and they just had a lot of death in their family.
Over and over.
And so I had something kind of medically difficult in our young children's life happen. And I thought, okay, we got our bad thing.
Oh. Yeah.
And
check that list.
I was in my 20s.
One and done. Has been checked.
Right. Yeah. I was in my 20s. So, I mean, give me that. I was very immature and just
naive. Just naive with youth.
Just naive to life.
Sure.
But over time, you really learn, and that's what being resilient is, right?
Right.
It's like learning that like bad things can happen, and they most likely will.
And I can be okay.
But I can survive them, and I can choose to create the story about them.
Right. Right.
We get to choose the story that we create about it.
Absolutely.
But sometimes watching other people go through difficult things, which is what this podcast is about, teaching people, teaches us too if we allow it to. And Jennie mentioned 100%. Something.
It depends how we receive it. Do we receive it as a weight that just damns us further, or do we receive it as an energy that empowers us?
Yeah.
So my youngest son was on a mission in Hungary when his elders quorum person who was very influential in getting him on his mission had a bike accident. Oh. And they had one child, a little girl, well, two, I think they had two by then. But the little girl had a muscular disease and it was terminal. She was going to die.
My word.
And it was just, and everybody in the neighborhood and the ward, we had schedules to go over and relieve mom and take care of it and stuff. Well, they took that experience and created a foundation to create money and stuff to go out and then he would ride bikes and stuff, and they would talk about muscular diseases and try and connect other parents so that they all had resources and stuff.
So they could find
that. They really did something with this. Anyway, he had a bike accident. I think it's, anyway, he was riding through, it was midnight. It's one of those all-night ones where everybody takes a stage, right?
Sure.
And he was in some place up near Moab, but it was a dirt road, and there was a cattle gate coming up, and he, headlamp on and all. He thought, well, I can hit it just right and just get up and over this. And the cattle gate grabbed his front wheel, and he flipped over the handlebars and ended up paralyzed. And it's a long story, but we're not going to go into it. But this event happened to them, and they were in the hospital, and everybody, of course, in the neighborhood found out about it and everything, and everyone was just floored. Why them, And me being the person I used to be, not that person anymore, I went to Spirit and I said, why them? They already have their hands full. You mentioned this family that had a bunch of health problems, right?
So many things, right?
Right. And I was like, why them? Their plate is already full. Why them? There's so many other people in our ward, neighborhood who have never had any major thing to do. They've never had to go through anything. Why not them? Let them exercise those muscles. This couple's already done so much. I need to know why you let this happen to them. And so I went into a fast. And this is who I used to be. You have to, no. And I said, God, I'm not going to eat till you will give me an answer. I was very
This
stubborn.
is so you.
Not anymore, but yeah, it was me.
I said it was so you.
Yes, it was. On the third day, I was getting a little weak. And he had his accident on Thursday, and so it was Sunday. And our bishop's wife was teaching the lesson. And it was about the Savior. And I was just sitting there. Anyway, the answer came. I had eaten that morning, by the way. So I did have some energy left. Third day, I was like, yeah, this is very petulant, that your behavior, not very grown up and mature. Anyway, the answer came. The answer was simply this: because they can. Watch and learn. And I have since that time watched people go through difficult things and observed and being taught.
And the rest of us learn through what they
Watch
endure.
and learn.
Wow.
Because they can. Because they can watch
I
and
often
learn.
think
That's beautiful.
And it was such a simple little message when I'd been so, I was enraged that God would let this happen to this couple, this family.
Yeah, I often think about that. Sometimes it's real. You don't want to say it's happening for them, but it really is, because if people allow it. I've also watched people, turn to drugs addiction and go down a whole different path, and maybe there's something there, and maybe their story's not written yet, But I think for the most times, people are innately resilient, and if they allow hard things to teach, they will teach us.
And they'll teach the rest of us too. Like
Yeah.
if I can learn from other people's heart, and sometimes
we get the opportunity several times a week to listen to these stories and to be touched and really create connections with these people that have really taught us so much.
And what a gift other people can give us when they suffer and struggle and we get to benefit from it. I think that's one of the beautiful mercies of life.
I
what
had
a great
I had a
conversation.
woman doing a podcast one time, and she used a term when she talked about trauma. And it stuck with me. Pods of power. Trauma can be pods of power.
Yeah.
If we go into it with the mindset that I've done this, I can do this, and the lessons I'm going to learn through this are going to benefit me and others.
Yeah.
And that was just powerful.
Yeah, that
What
is
a
a
powerful
look at
conversation.
difficult and setback.
Yeah. Do you have any final words on resiliency that you'd like to leave our guest?
I think that resiliency, like Jennie said, is inside of all of us, but not all of us have taken the opportunity to exercise those muscles on a regular basis. And so when bad things happen, we react differently. I recently had a relationship loss that you know about. And when it happened, I was like, okay, so how am I going to do this? How am I going to negotiate this? Because I've done this before, but how am I going to come out of this? And I went through, I mentioned earlier, the anger, the denial, the frustration, the naming, blaming, me, him, whatever. And on the third day, I came out of it going, I am so grateful that I had this relationship. I got to fall in love, and it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But I think because I've exercised those muscles of resiliency, when things happen, I don't see them as, this always happens to me. Why do I always have bad things happen to me? I react with, oh, here's another opportunity for me to excel and learn something and come out on the other side with this beautiful lesson and gift. Yeah. And I think that, like Jennie said, it's inside all of us. It's just how we go into it.
What do we do with it?
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
I love that. I've learned so much today. I've taken so many notes. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your energy. Like Michelle said, that light that you have. To our listeners, we hope you enjoy what you've heard today too. We hope that you'll go find us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe. That will give you notification every time when there's a new episode. Give us a like and a rating and a review. That helps us know how to improve the show. And as always, you're invited to share your story with the rest of us. You can either email us at rrpodcast@ksl.com or find us on social media on Instagram and Facebook at Relentlessly Resilient Podcast. There's a quick button that you can click to schedule a calendar opportunity to talk with us offline about the story you might share, and then schedule a time to come on the show and share it with all of us. Together we can really build and flex that muscle of resiliency.
And remember, whatever you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles others are dealing with in their lives. Have a great day.